welcome Point Break. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And it sounds like you had a pretty special and intimate relationship with that hammer, and losing it was almost comparable to losing a loved one. I'm Shahir Dow.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Thor Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
So there's ragtime music, no rock. I'm stealing that joke from Jeff Goldblum.
Okay, that's
ragtime,
fine.
no rock.
No, I watched that too.
You got it.
Yes, welcome back, dear listeners, to one of my. I mean, I love obviously doing these Marvel films. Shahir tends to dislike doing them.
That's not true. I don't dislike doing them. I just dislike the movies.
You just like watching the films.
Yeah, actually, that's funny. I don't think I dislike watching the films. I feel like that they're less than the sum of their parts is what I think I have an issue with. And I think, and an interesting topic that'll come up in our next week's review with The Florida Project, a film by Sean Baker that we're excited to be reviewing.
Yes.
Is that I think for me, the problem is that the Marvel movies, as part of the Disney world,
I see what you did there.
Yeah, take up an enormous cultural space, and in the wake of that space, there's a shadow left behind that often gets neglected, and I think that'll come up in the in our Florida Project review, both literally and metaphorically.
Sure. I don't
disagree?
think not from a cultural perspective, but from a business and a personable perspective. Yes, Disney. Well, you'll see in next week's episode.
I'm not from a cultural perspective,
because look, if something's good, it will reach if people pitch it hard enough.
But you don't think that Disney has a bigger capacity to make its products reach you? Versus say the Florida Project.
Sure, but what I'm saying is if you make good things and you have a savvy marketing behind you, money talks, but so does time and energy. So like you can, I don't think because the Marvel Cinematic Universe exists, some small startup thing doesn't exist.
I didn't say that. I said there's a bigger reach for say a Marvel movie. Like it's impossible to walk around New York City right now without seeing a poster for Thor Ragnarok.
Sure.
How many people know about the Florida Project?
Right, but people that will enjoy the Florida Project will also be able to seek out the Florida Project. Like we found it. It's not.
Right, but people who might not know what Thor Ragnarok would have.
So what's the criticism that successfal thing that everyone enjoys
I just don't
puts
know
out
why,
a shadow, puts too big of a shadow for something that so people can't find other things?
My point is that these things take up a larger cultural threshold in our commercial world, and in its wake, smaller projects have difficulty finding a foothold. Now, I don't think that is necessarily the fault of the films. I'm just saying that we live in a world where we talk a lot about Marvel movies.
Sure.
And we spend more time thinking about them. And I don't know necessarily if they're worth talking about that much versus other things that are doing interesting things.
I believe they are worth talking about that much. Also, it just seems kind of silly it's like the art in all of its forms is everywhere. You can find the big corporate-y style art, or you can find the smaller, more intimate, sort of drilled down to specific interests art, and you can find it. The internet is a wonderful place. Sometimes to find the most like special thing that is personal for you is actually a little bit of work.
Yeah.
So, and I think the journey in finding some of those things, some musical artists I like, some films I like, etc., is the actual act of hunting for them. Now, I don't think it's anyone's fault that something is harder to find than another. I think if you're looking for a certain thing, you might have to do some work to go find that thing.
But do you agree that for example, a film like Thor Ragnarok, a film by Disney, by Marvel, has a much bigger influence because of its marketing budget and its ability to push its product onto us than, say, the Florida Project?
Sure, but who cares? If I'm looking for a film,
you don't think that influences any capacity for us to talk about films?
No, because film critique is still the same no matter what film you're critiquing.
Right.
It's basically it's the specialty shit that you're looking for. And now whether or not anyone in their personal level thinks one thing should be mainstream and another thing should be specialty, that's neither here nor there, and that's also all personal. I just think that in this particular case, so this is the opposite. Here's a fun thing. the MCU and the Marvel stuff is my wheelhouse. So I 100% don't mind that it's in the public lexicon, very popularized. The thing that maybe I can relate to a little bit more of what you're saying is professional sports, the NFL, the NBA. These are things that are cultural touch points that I have no foothold in whatsoever. Do I begrudge them for being so popular, or do I ever blame them and be like, maybe this isn't the best for society? Not really, like, because it's just, that's how it is. That's and that's a popular thing that people like, and to get that fix of things, which in my case would be esports. I have to hunt and find things, and it's more work than just turning on my cable box. So I don't think it's not. There's nothing new or interesting. Maybe from a socio-ecological, like a sociology standpoint, there might be, but we're not a sociology podcast.
But I think like you're asking me if I hate the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't.
No, I was telling you do, because you've told me you do. You hate the whole exercise of it. You hate the idea that film.
I don't think I've ever. When have I ever said that?
You've said you dislike this whole thing where it becomes serialized like television. You want a film to be a standalone film.
I do. No, that is true. I do want a film to be a standalone film, and I don't like experiences where I feel like a movie is selling me another movie. I feel like that is, and I stand by that 100%. But I don't hate the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In fact, I think the last two Marvel films we've done, which would be Civil War and Guardians of the Galaxy, I've been very favorable on.
Very favorable, but you have said you've enjoyed them. It's just on if we're going on brand, you have not been a proprietor of this particular exercise.
No, but I have been favorable to those films. I actually did enjoy those films, and I think they were good.
Go back and listen to those two episodes and tell us how favorable we are for them.
But I think like every year we come to say I do our top 10s or anything, and none of those films end up in my top 10.
So not that favorable.
Well,
not top 10.
Also, I enjoyed Star Trek, but it's not going to end up in my top 10.
Sure,
you know what I mean. It's not. It's they're consumables that I don't tend to think about post their experience.
If any of our listeners would like to tell us their top 10 films so far, where exactly could they send those lovely pieces of information to us?
You could write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. You could go to our website www.onlymoviepodcast.com, or you could hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. To write us in your thoughts, feelings, emotions, or
what was the last thing?
I don't know. I had no or
thoughts, feelings, or emotions, or something else.
Or you could send us like your
fan fiction.
Yeah, your erotic Matt and Shahir fan fiction.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
You can also, you know what? This would be fun. iTunes reviews. Next iTunes review, write an erotic fan fiction in the iTunes review.
Oh my god!
And I'd prefer if that specific fan fiction
you're the top or I'm the
would be. I feel
am
like
I the top or you're the bottom?
It'd be very fluid.
Okay. We're rolling around. Yeah. It's a mess.
Tentacles somewhere.
Yeah.
But leave us 5 stars in erotic fan fiction.
I would love
that'd be so fucking weird.
We'd have to read it out
as
spoken word poetry kind of thing.
I'd find the most famous person I know. I don't know who that would be to read it.
Is it me? No,
I don't think it's you.
And we got a piece of email here, obviously from Stephen Buja, who's our friend on the Oscar Watch podcast, who wrote preemptively, knowing that we were doing a Marvel movie, that which would win out, the Shahir's love of Taika Waititi, the director, or his dismissiveness of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I sent him back the Jordan Peele sweating at the keyboard meme as an appropriate response to that. Obviously, I didn't watch any trailers. Didn't watch a single trailer for this film.
Have you watched them since?
No, I actually haven't watched them since.
You should. Maybe after this, but whatever. They're good. They're good trailers.
I think I might have seen didn't they do like a first teaser?
Yeah.
Like with just Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song playing?
Something like that.
Yeah. I think I probably saw that, and I did that thing where I saw it, and then I realized that they were kind of giving away material, and I stopped watching, and then I haven't seen a trailer since. So I just walked in cold to this movie. Not entirely cold though, because it's impossible for me, a New Zealander, graduate of Victoria University of Wellington, which is Taika Waititi's alumni, to not know the existence of this movie, and to not be thinking about what this movie means. I guess not as a cultural point, but just how interesting it is that a person who was a couple years ahead of me in college in this tiny film school that I went to in New Zealand is now directing this huge Marvel movie. And the other thing that I was thinking about a little bit in respect to this film was how much so that was it 17 years ago Peter Jackson directed Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And at the time there was no film like that of its scale, of that sort of fantasy. It was a very unusual thing for that film to exist. And now it seems like those kinds of films are part of the repertoire of any up and coming director in Hollywood. You've got to do your one, like even Darren Aronofsky, a filmmaker that we did this year with Mother, had his Noah, which is his big effects laden kind of thing.
Here's the interesting thing about that, and maybe I'm in the minority in this, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy in particular, and I say this excluding The Hobbit as well.
Okay,
the Lord of the Rings trilogy is still something. There's still something to that is above and beyond almost every huge live action battle-y like CG fest.
I completely agree with you.
There's something, and it's because the source material, and it's because the world, and it's because of the, I guess, almost the pacing and the way that it's treated. There's a bunch of different things. You could dissect it a million different ways, but it
also set the tone for everything we saw coming after.
But no one, I can't think of on a purely
like watching a battle and having your jaw drop kind of thing,
and having a large scale battle emotionally resonate that way. The only thing, and it's not the same because it's sort of tiny battles compartmentalized, I would say for wow factor is the Avengers for me.
Okay.
But it not in the same like world building, like thousands upon thousands of people coming together to have an actual war.
Right.
Many other movies have tried to do it. I mean, the Narnia movies,
I would say Game of Thrones to me is what
Game of Thrones is close.
To me personally, I guess I'm not as invested in Lord of the Rings, but Game of Thrones to me,
Game of Thrones feels more real in a weird way, these battles, because I think A, CG's come a long way. B, especially Battle of the Bastards. The only CG there was there's a ton of it, but to make it still look like real people are fighting, not like 20-foot tall elephants.
I think it comes down to it comes down to the thing you said though, which is that to me the Battle of the Bastards is more emotionally resonant. For me personally, I'm more invested. I'm not personally that invested in Lord of the Rings.
Sure, but like and I agree at this day and age, but even back in the day, because Fellowship of the Ring happened when Two Towers hit and the Battle for Helm's Deep happened.
Filmed right around the corner from my high school.
That's great.
Yeah. For 6 months.
Battle of Helm's Deep just feels like a war.
Right.
And I would argue, we just did Dunkirk as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels like war. That feels like a real war. But Battle of Helm's Deep gave me the same sort of emotions of a real war, even though it's stupid orcs and nonsense. Right. Like, so there's something to that. And look, I don't want to go too much into that, but there's a weight to the Lord of the Rings that I don't think mainstream action film from an emotional and from an all encompassing standpoint has done since Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones is there. Though.
Yeah. And I guess I was just sort of like, like this kind of thing. It's amazing to me that 17 years on, like Peter Jackson was the only person to kind of do that thing. I mean, not that there weren't big battle scenes before that, obviously, Braveheart, Ben-Hur, whatever, Spartacus, anything you want to talk about. But I think, the CGI fix laden battle sequence was kind of set by Peter Jackson in Lord of the Rings. And now 17 years later, it's kind of every director that's up and coming, are they going to do a Marvel movie? Are they going to do some sort of superhero film? Sure. Are they going to do some kind of action effects kind of thing? So it was curious to me that Taika, formerly Taika Cohen, still Taika Cohen is how he's known in Wellington. This guy we saw, we all knew, we moved in the same circles kind of thing, is now jumping over to the Thor, into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And obviously I've seen everything this guy has made. I've seen all of his commercials. I've seen, and it's interesting because it's not even from a research point of view where I've gone back and looked at his work. I've seen it happening in real time. So like, for example, I saw his short film, Two Cars, One Night, a VHS copy that was passed to me, before it was released at the film festival. I saw, his other short film, Saitama 2 at a screener that he'd had. I saw Boy in New Zealand. I saw Eagle versus Shark in New Zealand when he released it, and it was like, oh, the guy who got nominated for an Oscar has made his first, short feature film. Boy, as it became the #1 grossing film in New Zealand's history, followed by What We Do in the Shadows, becoming a huge hit.
That's right. That's where I jumped in.
Yeah, and I saw that in New York, and so it was kind of like and I went to a screening where he was there. I bumped into him. I said, "Hi, I'm from Wellington." We kind of chit chatted for a second, and then oddly I flew back to New Zealand and I went to a screening of Hunt for the Wilder People as he was there as well.
It's weird that you stalk him.
Yeah, I know. I didn't say hello to him at the Hunt for the Wilder People thing because I was like, oh, it's so weird that I saw you in New York a few months ago and now I'm in New Zealand and like seeing you here. I'm not gonna do that.
Hey, what are you doing after?
Yeah. So it's been interesting because I've been watching this guy's work evolve over real time, and now he's made the leap to this. And I have to say, do you want to read the synopsis for Thor Ragnarok?
Sure. Imprisoned, the mighty Thor finds himself in a lethal gladiatorial contest against the Hulk, his former ally. Thor must fight for survival and race against time to prevent the all-powerful Hela from destroying his home and the Asgardian civilization. That is what the movie is.
I feel like this movie would also make it Asgard.
Asgard. Well, that's what they were. There's a joke in there.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a joke in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Taika stuff. I saw Hunt for the Wilder People, which I loved. We've reviewed it here. Go check that episode out. And also What We Do in the Shadows. Just recently rewatched it on Halloween because that movie's great. Also, and this is sort of it was a culmination for me because I'm in the small camp that really liked both Thor movies.
Right.
So most people like the first one fine.
Yeah.
And a lot of people hate Dark World.
Yeah.
Dark World, it's funny. This is the interesting thing about this, and I might take this back as we have this discussion, but I thought of this when watching this film and in comparison. All of the problems I have with Thor: The Dark World still exist in this movie. But this movie is obviously a far more enjoyable film just because Taika is so fucking funny and he knows his way around silliness. Yeah. And we can get into more of bits of points like that, but I was fascinated that the same problems I had are still here.
Right.
And I don't know if that's an MCU issue or what Taika considers important to do or tweak or do whatever. I mean, you never really quite know. Yeah. Maybe once we discuss, you can, because you've watched more of a breadth of his work, you could kind of answer some of those questions.
Well, I was curious. I mean, I did a sort of mental exercise, which I was thinking about the MCU movies, and I was starting to, so a lot of my problems with the MCU movies tends to come down to is that I think they're building something interesting, but I don't think individually most of the movies have been that pleasurable or enjoyable for me as individual movies. And I sort of sat down and did an exercise where I was like, okay, what was the antagonist in every film? And I started I started at Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy. Am I missing something? Are those the only films we've got so far? 3 of each of those probably at this point.
Yeah. Well,
and then the Avengers,
and then Ant-Man, Doctor Strange.
So I was like going, what was the antagonist of each of these films? Because I think we've talked about this as like a film is only as good as its antagonist in some respects.
I agree and disagree with that. There's moments.
It's only the success of a film to me is only as good as how interesting the conflict within the film is.
Sure.
And for me, a lot of times the conflict in these films isn't that interesting. I think Civil War did a really good job with the conflict. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. So I kind of did that exercise and I was like, yeah, I kind of remember them, but my problem is for most part, I don't really care that much.
And this is an interesting thing. And this is something, and this, I want to clarify, this steps away from my theory that Shahir hates fun. This is an actual thing. And it just comes down to, I feel like, interest.
Yeah.
Because I'm so interested in this world and I have a deep-seated history in it and whatnot, the things you're seeing as a detriment of like, oh, well, either you need to see some things to sort of get this thing, or like perhaps like let's look at Iron Man 1. Yeah. Ironmonger, Jeff. Why am I blanking on
Jeff Bridges?
Thank you so much. The dude.
Yeah.
It's not a great villain.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting interplay, and actually what I consider sort of the antagonist part of that is Tony battling his sort of previous
Ego?
self and ego. So there's moments like that are great, but then look, Thor Dark World, Malkaeth is cookie cutter.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Kate Blanchett's Hela is cookie cutter, but she does a better job, and the director does a better job.
So we'll jump into Thor Ragnarok now, and I will say this. I flat out loved seeing this in the theater. I absolutely had just a blast watching this. I know that there's a potential for me to be biased here because I know what Taika does, and I was looking out for it. And the other thing was that I was like just in awe of is that there was so much New Zealand specific humor, particularly the character he played, Korg, in this. And I was just kind of like, I was elated at this sort of sense that this little slice of the place I come from was now on a world stage.
Yeah.
And I was just like thrilled to kind of see that. And I was like, it was just this like, to hear Taika do Korg, and that sort of, oh, we're going to start a revolution. It's going to be great. You want to come? It's like, that's the kind of joke humor we have in high school or in primary school in New Zealand. So to see that kind of take the world stage and to see it be embraced by the audience was just a real thrill for me.
It's being embraced monetarily as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just looking at the numbers, and as of recording this Sunday evening, we're looking at 121 million domestic, about 306 million foreign.
Off a production budget of what?
180. Now, granted, this is its second week international, but still, they made their money back.
Look, I'm sure this movie's going to make money. There's
a thing about it. I think Marvel movies on average make 2.7 times their
hence why they keep getting
or
made.
207. Yeah.
And hence why I say the Universal cinematic universe is in jeopardy.
Right.
It's all about finances.
Oh my God. Okay.
But so I love that. I loved just seeing, Taika take the center stage, and I think for me, watching him as a filmmaker is that I feel like he's gotten better every movie he's done, and what's become apparent in this one is his sense of comedic timing has almost hit like this sort of surgical precision in this case as well. He talks a lot in interviews about like the role of editing in comedy and the way in which the frames can change the value of a joke. Like if a joke sits for 10 frames too long, it can suddenly become unfunny.
Yep.
Whereas if it's like cut really sharply, or sometimes jokes need to be 30 frames or 3 minutes of like 100%. Dead time in order to work. So he's got this like surgical precision when it comes to his joking. I am in the camp where I thought Kenneth Branagh's Thor was an interesting attempt to like bring this Shakespearean, Wagnerian kind of sense of, like epicness to the Marvel world. But then I found that the first film, once it landed on Earth and it got just past that fish out of the water thing, I kind of lost interest in, whatever the thing, the middle monster thing that was coming out. I was like,
Annihilator, I think it's called.
Yeah. It's that problem of antagonist.
Right, but that wasn't the antagonist in the movie. Loki was.
Right. I find the Loki thing kind of, I'm neither here nor there on it, including on the Avengers, including in every iteration of Loki. I'm neither here nor there.
I think they do a fantastic job. I think the through line of Loki is really interesting. The through line of Loki is the most consistent thing in the MCU, and I love that it's a character that it's so funny because his MO is there the entire time, and you'll always see it, either the betrayal or it's this constant ping pong back and forth, the betrayal versus a little bit of heroism, back forth.
Yeah.
And that's something you don't see in film characters a whole bunch. Like he is, and I like this fact that he is literally like the god of mischief and comes off as so middle ground. Like he swings on a pendulum, but that pendulum is constantly swinging back and forth for where his sort of morals, if any, lie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like how consistent they've kept Loki, and it gives you that weird, I know what's going to happen, but it still feels kind of shocking when it does.
Right.
And that's something that's hard to do.
Okay.
I don't know.
Like I said, I'm neither here nor there on it. It's okay. But it doesn't excite me or anything like that. There are a couple of MCU movies, particularly. I guess my thing is when I don't see an MCU movie in the theater, I miss all the excitement and hype of going to see it, and that's when I find they're like at their most tiresome for me. So for example, I saw Thor: The Dark World at home, and I barely made it through that. It was real tough for me to finish that movie. I watched Doctor Strange recently, and while I was kind of like, yeah, this is okay, I was like checking my watch a lot during that movie, and I was just having a tough time like trying to finish it. I didn't feel the impulse to get through it. What I loved about what they've done here with Thor Ragnarok is that they to me, why this works is it has a real Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe to it. It has a real, like, the Hela character is kind of, yes, I know she exists in the Marvel, history, but in the film history, she just seems conjured out of thin air. It's like, oh, you got this other sister. Here she is. She's gonna wreak havoc on your planet, and go. And there's like, this is to me, and it really, I actually found that, like you said, the villain of Thor: The Dark World, it's the same problems, which is that Hela's character isn't that interesting. The threat that she imposes, while devastating thematically to the characters, doesn't feel really big. It's just kind of like there. And but the timing and precision of the jokes and the way in which this movie is genuinely funny, like actually laugh out loud and surprisingly funny. And I want to take us back to a moment last year when we reviewed Lady Ghost. I'm going to call it Lady Ghostbusters, but the Ghostbusters remake, which was a movie that ostensibly tried to do the same thing and featured one Chris Hemsworth doing the same shtick.
Very funny man, Chris Hemsworth.
Yeah, but you recall how badly that movie didn't work because it wasn't funny and it wasn't fun to watch, and there was no visceral pleasure in it, other than seeing Chris Hemsworth basically play against his beautiful man type. The Thor thing has been he's beautiful and he's heroic and he's immortal, whereas I think in this he's like a lovable goofball. And I love that they basically said, let's reconfigure what we've done in Thor 1 and 2. Like, let's take that kind of goofball angle that's there, but like really just make that the focus of what this film is. Let's wrap it up in this Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe with this, like, yes, there's a bad guy here. Yes, there's a thing that needs to be resolved, but ultimately we're just going to have a good time the whole way. And I was like, you know what? This works for me. I'm enjoying this. I love the lines. I love what's happening. It doesn't, like all the problems that I still have with the MCU movies and like whether they're consequential beyond what's in there what's in there, still problematic here, but I just had a better time watching this movie. My only other thing about that though is, like, I don't know if you can do this with any other character, and I think this is a really good marriage of directors, writer, and this particular character.
Sure, because it's a different comedy than James Gunn gives for the Guardians. This is and it doesn't feel like any other MCU. Out of all of the Avengers, the core team, Thor felt like the kind of most redundant.
Right.
Because, so you got Iron Man, and he's sort of his own specialty thing with the whole, genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Yeah.
You got Cap, who is both honorable and a fish out of water, like the most honorable man.
Yeah.
Then you have Thor, who's super strong and like gets angry and ragey. Then you have Black Widow and...
You mean Hulk, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
yeah.
sorry. Hulk. And then you have Black Widow and Hawkeye, who are sort of the paramilitary people, along with, Nick Fury. And then Thor is, yes, there's the God angle, but like he was mainly fish out of water in the first one and super strong. So he's kind of like a combo of Captain America and Hulk.
Yeah.
And like this, giving him this sort of slapsticky, not even slapsticky, just sort of like bouncy humor is the best way I can sort of call it, is a very smart move because it differentiates him from the rest of the Avengers. And I think that's very, very smart. The thing that I guess I didn't even say my sort of beginning things. This movie's great. I agree with all that. I really do enjoy it. In fact, it's probably in my top 5 Marvel movies at this time. I mean, the acting was great. Everyone seemed like they really loved what they were doing. And it seems like Taika's kind of a joy to work with based on even what's interesting about press for films. Like they always come up with like a gimmick or like a silly thing to do. And all these gimmicks that I've seen, even like poorly green screen things or like whatever that marketing companies have come up with, everyone seems like they're really enjoying all of the commercial aspects of promoting this thing, which doesn't always happen. Yeah. And that kind of, I like that meta narrative of just like everyone really having a good time. And I feel like I could totally just keep gushing on this movie for the rest of the time, but I'm not going to. Because I mean, if we want to keep talking about positives, I can 100% do that. I think everyone sort of knows where I fall with this stuff. But there's a couple things that I was expecting to be better. Okay. One of which was any and all gravity to the story whatsoever. Okay. The stuff that has hit me the hardest has been some of the Iron Man stuff and the Avengers and Captain America Civil War, because it feels like, now I know it's the illusion of stakes because there's a status quo and blah, 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 blah. And you can't just go off and kill people or have people disappear because it's the money making machine. And hopefully Infinity War breaks that and lets that actually happen, but that's neither here nor there. A pretty big problem you have with this stuff, Shahir, it seems like in the past anyway, has been having any sort of stakes whatsoever have it matter. It seems like everyone's sort of in the same thing as they were at the beginning as the end. This movie, I was hoping would have. I knew it'd be funny because Taika's hilarious. I was hoping it had a little more, not even relevance, just like weight to it. Like there's two particular things that, because this movie is so funny. Yeah. It makes the things that should be important not important anymore. The two things I'm thinking of is the death of the Warriors 3, and also now we're getting into spoilers. Whoops, we're there.
We're assuming because of the Disney marketing machine you've seen this movie. Yeah,
and the biggest spoiler, I guess, of all, unless you've seen actually the Infinity War poster, is
Thor dies.
Thor loses an eye.
Eye for an eye.
Now those two things, in my head, and I love this stuff. Like it would be very easy for that to have weight for me. It's totally just cast off happens, as like it just happens. And I'm wondering if there's a threshold of comedy action or comedy drama, like the mixing of them. Can you do that? And I was going back. I was like, well, let's look at the two films I've seen of Taika's thus far before Thor Ragnarok. It's been What We Do in the Shadows, which is hilarious, has no weight to it whatsoever. Doesn't really matter that it doesn't. They
try to do something with Taika's character and the old woman,
but it does not work. I mean, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just it's not presented as super important. Yeah. But then Hunt for the Wilder People, man. Like that movie is hilarious.
And Sam Neill's final haiku.
Yeah. And it's just so touching too. So there's this weird balance of like fucking drop jaw hilarity and pull at your heartstringsness. And I was really kind of hoping, because Thor has worked in other sort of ways, very Shakespearean, or actually very sort of Masters of the Universe for Thor of the Dark World, which works in my wheelhouse. So I was hoping that like maybe now I could get sort of a Winter Soldier-esque vibe for Thor, having emotional weight to a character. Yeah. And it didn't happen. Yeah. And this is not me saying it's a bad thing. It's something that I was hoping for, that I knew Taika was able to do. And who knows if it's just a spacing issue of like, oh, the MCU needs you to do this, so you can't do that and whatever. But a very easy fix. The two problems I had was the death of the Warriors 3. I don't care that they died.
Was there a female warrior?
Sif, she couldn't be in it due to scheduling conflicts.
So that's why she's not in the film? Yeah. That's why her character is not important anymore?
I know, right? Yeah. So what happens in the film is Hela goes to the Bifrost to try to like do something there, get the sword so she controls the Bifrost. And the Warriors 3, two of them, I'm trying to remember, they are, I think that was Fandrel and Volstagg were there. Or no, Hogan and Volstagg. She just fucking ices him like instantly. And it's meant to be like whoa, she's so powerful. Yeah. Later on, you see the third one of them, Hogan.
Not the Hulk.
In front of an army of Asgardians ready to fight Hela. Yeah. I just thought it would have been a cleaner, more meaningful thing to have the three of them there, have their little, because the battle's already there. Your SFX budget and everything is already there in a battle.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like a lot of Taika's pacing, especially in What We Do in the Shadows, is very like, here's a chunk of a scene, here's a chunk of a scene, like it's very piecemeal, and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. But I feel like they split that moment up and bled fat too quickly through. Like, at least in that battle, like there was a moment of like the whole armies are fighting, she's killing everybody. He's holding his own for a second. These are characters that have been with us for 2 whole movies, and they're supposed to be Thor's best friends, and he doesn't mention them once.
Yeah.
So that bugged me.
I do agree with what you're saying. However, I guess my issue is that I personally have never cared about those interrelationships. So for the film to kind of gloss over them and just kind of like run through the story as quickly and efficiently as possible with the end goal of just making me laugh and smile, I was okay with. I do agree with you that there's no weight. But I think the thing is as well, and I'll go back to our Guardians of the Galaxy review, which is that we talk a little bit about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the sort of revelation of Peter Quill's father and the loss of like knowing who his real dad was, versus who his adopted dad was. To me, I actually found that not really that meaningful, so the more that the film tries to like make that work for me, the less I'm invested in it.
That really worked for me.
Yeah, no, I can, and I understand. So I guess what I'm saying is, again, because to me the best way I would describe this is a Saturday morning cartoon. Is that I was okay with that sort of lack of gravitas, to this whole thing.
And I don't even need like huge gravitas. I just need.
You needed a little respect to the property.
The property, but also at the end of the day, all of this comes down to all the these 2 problems I have come down to Thor's relevance or Thor's importance. This is a character that's supposed to be, he's one of the tent poles of this entire thing. And even beyond that, he's supposed to be an important character.
Right.
His 3 best friends get destroyed without a word.
Yeah.
And then also when he lost his eye.
Yeah.
I didn't even go, like there was no, like the way it was shot was just so like, and then this happened.
Yeah. And also because it doesn't have any weight to it, because it's also like there's a sort of it's of no real consequence because Odin has lost his eye. So it's just this kind of like, I am like now like my father.
But this is the weird thing. Thor Dark World, he loses his hand, or there's the illusion that he loses his hand. And that moment to me, I was like, holy shit.
Also, he loses Mjolnir in this film. And it's like,
that moment had power for me. But you know what's interesting about that? And it's in the advertising. That's in front of a green screen, and they changed where it happens in the trailer versus where it happens in the film.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because I had seen the trailer, but the green screen, the compositing didn't look wonderful in that moment. So that it was jarring because I'd seen the trailer. I'm like, this isn't where it happens, and I'm glad they did it because I liked that it was a bit of a surprise where it happens and whatnot. But that had weight for me.
It doesn't matter that he loses Mjolnir. He can still
Mjolnir.
Mjolnir. There's if you can see the short film that they made with like Thor lounging around in Australia and making drawings about Mjolnir and saying trying to
muscles when he lives with Daryl.
Yeah, exactly.
What happened during Civil War?
Yeah, it's hilarious.
So just closing up that shit is there. Because I know Taika can do this and do it very well and kind of quickly and transition very quickly, I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting that level of like nimbleness with the comedy versus any sort of emotion that was portrayed. The only time it hit for me really was the brother stuff with Loki, especially in the elevator. They have like some really nice moments together in this film that I feel like that was a nice thing. It's almost like Taika wanted to just like there was characters of this franchise that he liked, and then there was shit that he didn't care about. Like, for instance, I bet you Thor losing an eye, I bet you that was a must for Marvel. I bet you for whatever reason that was on a list saying, Taika, you can do whatever you want, Thor has to lose an eye. And he's like, got it. Because it didn't feel like he cared about that moment, therefore it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's just, I feel like maybe that's just a price we all pay with artists that we like that have to be involved in this sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess I was surprised at how much they let him, or how much it felt like he was injecting his very personal humor. And again, like,
and I do think that's great.
The way, because again, if you look at Chris Lord and Phil Miller on another Disney property, the Han Solo movie, they got fired for this very reason.
But I think they knew, like in this, it's so funny because I think they knew, like, oh shit, Thor, we need something.
Yeah.
We need another comedy thing, not Guardians, not James Gunn.
Yeah.
But we need it to be something completely different. This guy's hilarious.
Yeah.
Let's roll. Whereas Han Solo, Star Wars, I don't know if we're ever going to get a Star Wars comedy. I mean, maybe we will. Maybe we will now that they've seen this shit. Like,
yeah.
But,
Who knows? I guess, like, again, I am moderately indifferent to the entire mythology of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. Like, it doesn't land for me in a way that's meaningful or profound. I think the closest I got was the end of Civil War with who is the bad guy's name in the end of Civil War?
Zemo?
What's his name?
Baron Zemo?
Baron Zemo. And like this idea that he has lost something personal.
He's one of the top 3 villains, which is weird. This is normal dude.
What's your top 3 villains?
Ego, then Zemo, then number 1 is still Loki, because I think they do what I basically had said beforehand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, like, only Zemo is the one that I'm mildly interested in.
Sure.
And again, I think, like, if you look at Taika's approach to this film and approach to the marketing and everything around it, and even in the film itself, you would argue that the one consistent qualitative factor in whatever his brand of comedy is irreverence. It's like,
yes.
it's like saying, oh, there are these. Oh yes, we know that there's this myth god thing, but look, he's an idiot.
But then there's Wilder People, man. Like that's.
But I think even in Wilder People, the whole point is that there is an irreverence to the way in which scenes should play out. It's like when the kid
But there's a weight to effective character.
No, but I mean, I think he eventually gets there with that film as well. In that sense, but it's also because and I gotta say, he's not trying to do like a franchise with that film. He's trying to wrap up what these two characters mean to each other in that movie. And so, that's the way you wrap those two characters up. In the Thor universe, we know this is going to continue. And I will say this, for me, there was an interesting moment, and I think it comes through in the cultural landscape we're living through now, post Harvey Weinstein, post the Kevin Spacey kind of controversy.
R.I.P. by Halloween costume.
Yeah, there you go. Just this notion of what I think is exciting and powerful right now is that the norms that we believed as standard are no longer being tolerated. Mm-hmm. And there's a moment in Ragnarok where Tessa, what is her name? Tessa Thompson's character, the Valkyrie. Basically looks at the history of Odin and the way in which, and I think even Hela does this as well. And there's a moment that we notice, which is that like all the women have been written out of these histories, and all the like what we thought to be true is not true. And what I think is smart about this movie is it doesn't try to replace that with more heroism from Thor.
Yeah,
his actual way to succeed is to step out of the way and
agreed.
realize that he has no relevance in this conversation. And I thought, for me, like when that started happening, I was like, oh, this is actually a really smart play, and it's subversive in an interesting way. Now, I don't think the film really is aiming to make that the central ploy of this movie.
But that's why it's great. I think because it's a subtext. It's a subtext. It's not making a huge deal out of it, but it's presenting something that's important.
Well, it can't really do what this film needs to do, which is make Tessa the hero. It can't make Tessa the central character, because that's not the way the world operates in this universe. So, but I think it mentions it plays it on a smart level, and then it moves on, which I think, in terms of the irreverence with which Taika and his writers play with on this film, it's surprising to me, by the way, that Taika isn't credited as a writer on this film, because it feels, I know a lot of it was improvised, but it feels like the 3 writers that are on this, Eric Pearson, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost, it feels like they're writing with his voice. And it's hard to not feel like he has had some hand in the actual screenplay. I'm sure he has.
There's no question.
But to the point where it's like, I can't imagine anyone else writing in Taika's voice. So like to have 3 credited screenwriters that doesn't include him seems unusual to me, but that's neither here nor there.
I mean, Valkyrie is the standout for me in this film.
Yeah.
That and honestly, Goldblum as the Grand Master, and that might be just a pure like
Goldblum playing Goldblum.
But that's like pure casting genius. Like because the Grand Master is one of the brothers of these beings. I forget exactly what they're called in the MCU, but the Collector's one of them that are just basically the almost like id of specific types of attributes humanity does. So the Collector collects.
Yeah.
The Grand Master is obsessed with games.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just to have that sort of spacey Goldblum nonsense was just pure casting genius. And I was happy to see that he wasn't just a cameo.
Yeah.
He wasn't Doctor Strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, that was a moment. This the Doctor Strange thing. I loved seeing it. I think it was really fun, and the fun of it outweighed the other thing. I was half expecting maybe Doctor Strange like does something at the end to kind of wrap up like a bow with it.
Yeah.
But it didn't, and that was like okay. I mean, I guess that's cool.
It's just,
it was like icing.
Yeah. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
And I think again, I think the way in which he kind of like just irreverently treats all of this material and it just kind of, and again, I'm going to keep coming back to Saturday morning cartoon. It's that sense that this is an episodical. Our main goal is to just have a good time, enjoy this as much as possible. And for me personally, for the first time, I mean, I mildly enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy, but I didn't like this was laugh out loud funny.
I think I figured out sort of you because it doesn't affect you for whatever reason, any sort of, and that could be a fault of the film. That could be a fault of your upbringing or your
don't talk about my upbringing on this show, buddy. No, I mean, you don't know anything about my upbringing.
No, but I'm saying, I'm maybe fault is the wrong word. I'm saying the style or what you were into when you were a kid, or what you were involved with as you were your formulative years of entertainment consumption.
Move to your point.
Is that you, because if something doesn't work, I guess it could be saved with humor.
Yeah.
And because of my upbringing or my sort of cultural touch points of whatever, I find more fault in just the humor working.
Here's the thing. I love comedy, but what I don't like is comedy that thinks it's funny and
it isn't. Oh yeah, that's the worst.
That's the worst. And I think like Ghostbusters is a good example of that. Where it's like where every joke kind of like
the new Jumanji movie looks just like that.
Yeah, it's like you can see the writing, you can see like, oh, we think this is going to be hilarious, and it's like it's not. Whereas the thing about the comedy here is I think it's genuinely funny,
100%.
and it comes from a place of like comedy. Is more difficult than drama, and because it requires you to be smarter. Like like great comedians are geniuses, and that's what I love about great comedy is that it touches. It plays on your intelligence.
I don't know if comedy is harder than drama. Like when you get to the greats of it.
I genuinely believe like comedy is much more difficult to be effective than drama is.
For intellectual people. There's a weird sort of tinge of you're 100% right. Look, I'm not disagreeing with good comedy is incredibly difficult. And you need to be a master at it to do it. Taika is a master. Many comedians that I love their stand-up, I feel like, are masters. But I feel like cheap comedy relies on the same style or type anyway of cheap tricks that bad drama does. Like too much on archetypes.
Right, but bad drama doesn't work either.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like I don't know if one is harder than the other. I feel like people are better at one than the other.
Right. No, yeah. People are instinctually aligned to one particular medium or the other.
So I have a hard time. Yeah,
But I do believe that comedy is a very difficult thing to do.
Super hard.
And, again, Paul Feig, who directed Ghostbusters, brilliantly directed Bridesmaid, and knows comedy, but completely falls flat in Ghostbusters. And so it's a very tricky medium to get right, and it's very tricky to make it land in a way that doesn't feel cheap. That's a difficult thing to do.
It's interesting because the comedy here doesn't feel cheap at all. It doesn't feel cheap. The story kind of does.
Yeah, the story is cheap, but then to me most of the film's stories have been kind of.
See, that's where I disagree. Which we've debated.
We've debated that.
But it's so strange. It's so. why for me? I feel like I should be more singing this film's praises because I did love it. Like I loved sitting there and watching it. I went with a bunch of friends and it was like super fun.
Yeah.
I think there's many aspects of it that are just a pure fucking delight. Like this feels like it should have been like a June like blockbustery thing to just go with. I think it's
Maybe
more
it was too close to Guardians for that reason.
Yeah, I think it's far more enjoyable than if it on a pure joy level than Spider-Man.
The negative I would have on this film, in that point, is that Guardians, Spider-Man, what other Marvel movies have we done on this show?
Most of them, Civil War.
Civil War, I do have a special place for, but most of those films, they don't have a lasting impact. They're kind of like a sugar high.
But will this have a lasting impact?
I don't think this will either, but I enjoyed the sugar high of this more than those.
I think maybe my inkling is just leaning towards something like Guardians 2, where I think it's not hilarious. I think the first Guardians is funnier than the second Guardians, but I think the second Guardians has more weight than the first Guardians. And this is the weird thing, and I keep going back to Hunt for the Wilder People. Because I saw that and I saw the just pure masterful balance of these two worlds of comedy and drama from this guy. I think I went into this expecting a little more than what I got from the drama or weighty side of it. Now, again, I don't want to take away. It is so fucking funny and fun to watch. But I don't know. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to make me like really like not only laugh with Thor, but like care what happens. Like, I don't give a shit about Asgard. Asgard felt the most empty here than all of the three movies.
Yeah.
And even though from a writing perspective, side note, I love how it treated Ragnarok.
Right.
So it's not like Hela's trying to bring about Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Ragnarok is the solution for no one being able to kill Hela.
Right.
And that was so fucking cool. I love shit that like a thing happens in the beginning of the movie, then they're like, oh yeah, and they use it as the way to sort of finish the action in the end.
I like all that. I think the thing that it comes down to is that and the thing that I think I was kind of a little bit in awe of is that Taika's last film, Hunt for the Wilder People, had a budget of $2.5 million. New Zealand, I would say, sort of like, or maybe it was 2.5 US, like it's not a lot of money.
And Sam Neill and the woman who plays the cop in that movie were in this.
Yeah, Rachel House. Yeah. And he jumps from a $2.5 million film to a $180 million film with a rabid fan base. People love these characters and people are interested. And I think, a less confident director, a less confident person maybe. And again, this gets into that sort of tricky area of auteur theory where it's like you're trying to discern the art from the artist. It would like be kind of beholden to the franchise, be beholden to the history of the characters. And, I read Planet Hulk before going to see this.
I'm sorry.
I don't mind Planet Hulk, but it was like, but the funny thing was reading Korg in Planet Hulk, who is this like noble warrior, and then seeing Taika's take on it, where he plays and I've seen him describe it this way, as he plays it at a bouncer from the Hawke's Bay, which is this small town in New Zealand, who's just sort of like this goofy guy, and I was like, he really isn't beholden to like trying to please people who love these characters, and the way he treats Thor, very much so, is this like, I don't really, I don't care that this is supposed to be the Norse god of thunder.
The thing about it is, no one gives a shit about Korg.
Yeah,
no one does. But
I think he treats the Hulk that way as well. You know what I mean?
And I would argue that no one actually gives a shit about the Hulk. Right. People like the Hulk and what he can do because it's a neat sort of power set. But I
compare that to like the Avengers, and they basically make fun of that line in this film. It was like, the sun's going down, buddy. The sun's going.
They mock the shit out of it. It's great. I love it.
So I'm saying he's not doing the same thing that Joss Whedon does, which is that Joss Whedon loves these characters, and he does a good. And Joss Whedon
did set up the initial idea, and I don't think that this is. I think the Marvel. I think Kevin Feige and everybody has sort of rolled with this, that Thor is the funny one. Just the way he was sort of fish out of water, all of his shit and all that stuff. Like, they all had little jokes in Avengers, but Thor's stuff, if you look at it, it's much more slapsticky.
Right.
So I think, and then Thor Dark World kind of didn't really do anything with that. And now you give it to Taika and he can do his own sort of thing. Yeah. I think Joss opened the door for Marvel to be amicable to doing this awesome thing.
Yeah. But it's like he's not as he's not as reverent to who
and I
these
think
people
that's
are.
fine for characters like Korg. In fact, I think when these films do interesting stuff with minor characters, like no one gives a shit about The Collector, but Benicio del Toro did such a cool, just like weird vibe to it. Like, again, Ego the Living Planet, no one gives a fuck in the comics of what happens to it.
Yeah.
But like Kurt Russell gave it a little bit of a life that it didn't already have. And this obviously is a more extreme version with Korg. And that's fine. It's so funny that Wilder People is the reason that I can't get 100% on board. And it's my own, it's my own fault, I think, that I can't. I think I wanted to have like 90% good time with 10% feels, and I just got like 100% good time, which is great.
Yeah.
I love movies like that.
Yeah.
But I think when it's so close to the wheelhouse that I want to have the emotional.
It's the reason, I mean, it's not the same case, but like when Terminator 3 came out, and I think the director was Jonathan Mostow, and they sort of started playing the same scenes that they did from Terminator 2 as jokes. And I was like, I'm not into this because I love what they did in Terminator 2. But I guess in this case, I don't really care too much.
Yeah, and the most people I don't think will. I think the joys of this film completely outweigh these sort of weird, petty. And I don't even think I honestly don't think my complaints, I was going to call them fanboyish. I don't think they are.
Yeah.
I think every bit of change, and like I like all the changes they made. I just wish that some of that the movie I watched had some weight to character.
Let's jump sideways for a second and talk about the score.
Okay,
in a couple of different respects. For one is that they got Mark Mothersbaugh to score the film, former bandmate,
He's your bandmate?
Yeah, my former bandmate, former band. Part of the band of Devo. Yeah. And he scored a lot of Wes Anderson films, scored the Lego movies, scored the Royal Tenenbaums, scored a film that we talked about, The Life Aquatic. And I think Mothersbaugh's aesthetic, which is this sort of like 90s synth pop kind of thing,
good.
is you feel that in this film. And I think that's closer to what Taika's done. It's closer to, like Taika's worked a lot with the Phoenix Foundation, a New Zealand band who has that kind of feel to it as well. I'm hoping to go out on a Phoenix Foundation song for this.
We will.
So I really, I like that he basically did like weird 90s sci-fi.
It's so good.
For this film, and I think it was just a really appropriate choice. But also talking about the Immigrant Song, Led Zeppelin's track that's used both at the beginning.
It's used a bunch.
Yeah, it's used and the thing is that I was reminded of our conversation around Guardians of the Galaxy and the use of music, and I think the thing for me is I've definitely heard the Immigrant Song a lot before. I've listened. We all know that song. It was used famously in the David Fincher adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with Karen O doing a remix of it.
Which is a great track.
Which is a great track, yeah. But I thought this was a really smart play on it because unlike just using it as score, it actually became a leitmotif for the character. And so we saw it at the beginning. It's like, oh, he's this badass, but he's going to lose everything. And then it comes back when he realizes his true power. Now, it's not like profound or anything like that, but it's just a smart use of that track that works, basically while still using a song that we're all really familiar with. You know what I mean? Like, and that was a complaint that I had about Guardians of the Galaxy.
I know, but it's kind of the same thing.
Well, the thing in Guardians of the Galaxy is it did what we expected that song to do, and whereas this uses it in a repeated way, to make a punctuation mark.
It still does exactly what you expect it to do.
It does what you expect to do, but it works. It
works. I'm just saying it's the same thing, and it worked for you here, maybe because you connected with this film more than it worked for you in Guardians.
It worked for me here because it connected with what I was seeing on screen in a way, and it
connected beautifully in Guardians.
It didn't land for me in Guardians, but I think here,
I think your love for the awesome stuff that this man does is showing here.
And again, I did preface this with it's not profound or anything, but I think like when we heard Cat Stevens in Guardians of the Galaxy, I was kind of like, oh, boy. Whereas here, I was like, cool.
It had the same emotional effect for me. It's the same trick, and I like that trick.
It's a good trick, and it works. I just like that it was repeated here.
Yeah.
I think that is what kind of like made it work for me. And so, this added use of Mark's Mothersbaugh plus the smart usage of pop culture tracks.
And the smart use of mirroring basic graphic treatments, colors, that sort of visual aesthetic with this style of music makes a ton of sense.
Right.
It feels, this is something I'll say that I even from the trailers gravitated towards this weird ass fucking world they've built, and that literally takes place on an interdimensional island of misfit toys. All feels very complete and very just like a solid actual place due to the art design.
The influence by the Jack Kirby work. I love that there was a line that Thor has in this film, which was like, it's like this room, pick a color, red or white, which is it?
Yeah.
I just love like that they were making fun of everything.
Everything but Asgard felt really, really complete to me. And Asgard should, and it's funny, the importance of what Asgard looks like, or Asgard, it has gone down each Thor film, and now it's not even there anymore. So, but Asgard is a people, Shahir. It's not a place.
Yeah.
And hopefully, with the MCU, we get with the comic treatment where Tony Stark builds them a new Asgard in Oklahoma, but I don't think that'll probably happen.
Is that what's going to happen?
Well, that's what happens, and then, but that's later on down the line in some comic book stuff. Yeah.
So, I'm not sure. One thing we haven't really talked about is Chris Hemsworth's timing, which I think, it's razor sharp. And I love that he, like, they do things where it's not just that he's like lovable doofus. He's also like constantly manipulating everyone around him, but like is kind of lovable at doing, like when he says to Hulk, you're my favorite one, and then he like meets Bruce Banner and goes, yeah, but you're my favorite one, and like Bruce is like, I'm not strong, like I'm intelligent, isn't that bitter? And he's like, and like he just kind of turns to him, is it though?
Is it though? Yeah. But that stuff works so well because it feels true to character for me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it feels true to character. I just know that this guy has impeccable timing.
Yes, but those are values too. And I'm not taking this away from Chris Hemsworth. I'm just saying the idea that Thor, that this version of Thor not only is sort of a little bit manipulative and kind of a bit of a dick, which would make sense if you were a god.
Yeah.
But he also just he values strength over intelligence. Like that's what he does.
Small arms, is that what he's called? Like tiny arms or something like that.
Ruffalo does a great job too.
Yeah, Ruffalo does great. There's little details that I love, like when Tessa is coming into the room and Thor's trying to look tough and he puts his arm on the shelf and he kind of misses it and he's like trying to readjust. There's a scene earlier, like when he's screaming at Stan Lee about to cut his hair or something like that. It was like, it's really good stuff like that I think, it's a really smart reconfiguration of who we saw as Thor from, even to the point where it was like, what was that line where they're talking about Natalie Portman's character, and he goes, no, I didn't dump her, she dumped me. It was a, mutually.
No, she didn't dump me, I dumped her. It was a mutual dumping.
It was a mutual dumping.
Yeah.
This sense that behind all this muscle, behind all this like good looks, there's this kind of lovable, slightly insecure doof.
Yeah.
And again, I just kind of was like, I can kind of watch that. I can work with that. And I think it's a different level. Like Tony Stark plays all ego, and his ego is funny.
Yes.
But this is like he plays as, he plays against what he looks like, and I think that really kind of works for the character. And I think they do that with the Hulk as well. So it was just,
this is my favorite iteration I've seen of the Hulk. I will say that. I still don't think that he would work in a standalone film. I'm not looking forward to it if they ever do that. But I think, because he just works so well against other characters, he's such a great thing, because if you put Hulk and Cap together, it'd be a completely different dynamic. If you put Hulk and Tony Stark together, or Spider-Man, it's just... I
think I liked him most in the Avengers.
He's the best spice for these other characters. And I love that they've kind of figured that out. And apparently Hulk's arc will take place across 3 movies. They're like drizzling him in. I'm still not quite clear how he got to Sakaar.
Wasn't it he was on that?
He was on the Quinjet, but the Quinjet doesn't go to space. Like that's I don't know. So I'm sure there's an answer. The only other thing, Karl Urban, Seemed a bit perfunctory as Scourge. I liked him.
Yeah, I loved his first scene with the shake weights and the two guns dis and Stroy.
Yeah, but he felt super perfunctory, just like he existed because Hela needed someone to banter with.
Yeah, well, because so Cate Blanchett in general kind of gets but I think I
loved her.
I think she's
chewing scenery. She's loving it.
I love like she has little side quips like "You're welcome," by the way.
Yeah.
And like she gets basically the Marvel villain treatment, which is that like we just need someone to punch up against this guy. I think if you're looking for the serious, or for the feels film that you're talking about, it's really a film between Hela and Valkyrie. That's where that would be. That's where this film. Yeah. If you want that, that's what it's about.
Or you could play it up with Thor 2 with the whole brother, sister, exiled sort of nonsense thing too.
Yeah.
It all depends on where you want to go. The thing about Hela that I really liked was it's very easy to play the goddess of death with like a ton of resurrection-y powers, and that's something I don't give a shit about. Like she does have that army of the dead, but she needed the flame from Odin's armory to actually make that happen. I liked the fact that she was the goddess of death in the sense that she could just kill everything incredibly easy.
Right.
Like just daggers for days. She shot a dagger out of the ground into a spaceship, and I was like, all right.
What's cool about that, and okay, so now let's talk a little bit about
I like your revisionist history angle too, by the way. I don't know if I said that or not, but the thing when like she goes into the throne room and like you see the happy-go-lucky like Odin and Thor and Loki,
I think that's,
and she breaks that. She's like, "No, look, asshole, we did this."
Yeah, and I think again in the sort of cultural space we're living in, I think that's a worthy, appropriate topic. Now, whether that came up before the Weinstein world and it just happens to resonate in an interesting way,
I think it resonates, but it's also I like that it's an undertone.
Yeah, the thing, let's talk a little bit about Spider-Man Homecoming. And I want to talk a little bit about the fact that the best scene in Spider-Man Homecoming is the scene with Peter Parker and Michael Keaton in the back of a car.
Oh, disagree.
Oh, what's your favorite scene in that movie?
I would say probably the scene when he's alone in the base when he's like stuck in the warehouse.
Okay. Okay.
The reason the scene with Michael Keaton, it's cool.
Yeah.
But the second you actually think about it, it makes zero sense.
Right. I guess what I'm saying
because
is
he has super strength. He could grab the gun in an instant. He could hit his throat and make it so he couldn't talk. He could drag him to the police and then get back to the dance within 20 minutes.
You remind me of when you talk like this is comic book guy from The Simpsons.
But it's true.
He really just.
But that's not even a thing. Now, yes, there's a moment like. The tension is interesting because of a narrative perspective, but it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
And I like things to make sense.
Okay. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you. Yeah. I think for me that is the most interesting scene in the film because it's about the two characters who are coming to a head in terms of what they want, and they're in direct opposites of each other.
Yeah.
That is the point at which where there is no negotiation beyond this point.
Right, but it just makes zero sense how they resolve it. He waits for him to go get his giant robot suit, and then they go punch each other because that's what has to happen.
That's my other point, is that these films tend to equate action as a resolution of that conflict, but unfortunately in most cases, like I find the final fight in Spider-Man Homecoming, again, I'm neither here nor there about it. It happens, I see it, and it's a bunch of, it's a lot of like punching CGI kind of stuff.
I like it at the end of it because the ultimate downfall of the Vulture is not Spider-Man, it's his greed that sort of takes him down, and I find that I like that angle of it. It actually doesn't come down to a punch fest. It comes down to, oh no, he thinks he needs this to save his family or whatever, and he can't do it, and he almost dies, and Peter heroically sort of drags him.
But they have a punch fest on a plane.
It's
for like 10 minutes, right?
No, it doesn't actually happen on the plane. When it crashes, and then they have maybe a 30-second punch fest on the beach.
But there's a big CGI sequence on a plane.
But they don't beat it. It's not a slugfest. It's not like the other movies. It's not.
Did we watch the same movie?
No, bad things happen on the plane. There's a little bit of zipping around. It's not like an action. Like if you look at the level of hits, like a slugfest to me, honestly, is like that Hulk movie that's kind of still part of the MCU between him and Abomination in Harlem. Like that's boring as fuck.
I guess what I mean is like an action sequence is supposed to be the resolution climax, and the
resolution climax in Spider-Man is actually when he decides to save Tombs from the fire. That's the resolution of it. And I like it. Just like Doctor Strange, I love, there's a bunch of actiony bullshit beforehand, but the resolution is him tricking Dormammu and not getting into a slugfest with a fucking space deity.
Right. I guess my point here is that, like when it comes down to the action, I find that in most of these cases, they tend to feel like they're just kind of like, okay, we've kind of gotten through the tension stuff. Now we're going to just slug it out in some way and have a sequence here where because we need
Often
an action.
they do. I just don't think those are the best examples of, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying that,
right. And like to me, the most intense sequences are when it's Peter Parker and Michael Keaton in the back of a car and they're talking to each other and they're having a conversation. That's where that tension is most vital for me and most interesting. And what I actually liked about this film is that I felt like the in the typical way, the fight sequence, like when Hela destroys the entire the army at in Asgard, I was like, yeah, okay, cool, she did that. But and it's a little sequence, but it's kind of like that thing, which is that it's just kind of glossed over quickly and we move on from it really quickly. And I like that at the end of this, there's this realization that Thor just doesn't need to fight her, that he just needs to move out of the way. And I think I appreciated
That's nice.
that was a kind of that we don't need to see Hela and Thor kind of punch it out and have a big slugfest. It's just, I just need to get out of the way of this.
Another thing I really enjoy, I feel like this movie better Zack Snyder's action sequences than Zack Snyder does at this point, because there's 2 or 3 moments of really cool slow-mo, looks like a painting moments.
The moment when they're talking about Valkyrie, and the thing I was remembering about
there's Valkyrie's dream vision.
Yeah.
There's the scene when Thor's coming down with the lightning behind him and the army of the dead's piling up, and there's a couple others. If you're going to show me an action sequence that we know doesn't really matter, paint
make it beautiful.
Make not only cool. Yes, that's the word I was going to use, is beautiful. Make it beautiful, because those images stick with me, even though the battles are not really of consequence for me and they don't feel the weight. But when you make it like a fucking painting, that's where you can get gravitas for these sort of throwaway punch fests.
I think the only problem there is you can go too far with that, and that's what Zack Snyder does.
Oh, yes, 100%.
If you think about his fight sequences,
it's showing restraint. Taika is a master of knowing when to do what, I think. And I really appreciate that those were there and that they also were not overused. Even to the point it's not the same level of slow-mo, but when Thor and the Hulk are leaping at each other, that's a painting in itself of just like in the arena. So,
but to that point as well, I would say the fight between Thor and Hulk kind of did bore me. But when Hulk and Thor were kind of quipping on a bid about what they wanted, that's way
better.
more. That's way more interesting, and a way more interesting way to have these two characters.
I 100% agree on both levels, on the level that you're presenting, and also my whole it still makes sense for the story level.
Yeah.
Wow, we've been going for a bit, guys and gals, and everybody. This has been the only podcast about the film Thor Ragnarok. We didn't do our classic sort of oh, should you see it? Hey, Shahir, should people see this movie?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go spend your money. Go see it in some IMAX 2D or some RDX.
Yeah. By the way, I had to see it in RDX because the 2D session was sold out. I didn't realize that RDX is $20.
Yeah.
It
looks good.
But it's weird. It's like a behind the scenes thing. It's like saying I want you to pay more for HD distribution, which is should be the standard.
I agree. I don't think, do Movie Pass and then check in to go see something else.
That.
And then, no, don't do that. That's illegal.
Yeah. Is it illegal?
It's not illegal.
Well, yeah.
It's frowned upon.
Yeah.
Shahir, when you are not being the New Zealand god of thunder, where can folks find you?
You can feel me raging with lightning bolts on my website at www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD.com, which has links to my Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, which you don't need to see. Why would you?
You always say that. Maybe they want to see it.
Nah, I don't think they do. Matt, when you are not slightly disturbed or slightly hurt by the lack of feels in a movie, where can people find you weeping about it?
You can pick up my bucket of tears at MatthewKroll.com. That's MattheWKROL.com for my life and works. Also Skeletor with the number 4 PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Next week we'll be back with the Florida Project with special guest Annie Gillies, executive producer extraordinaire,
and someone who we might have begrudged, belittled, and maybe
I don't think we did any of those things.
But I think she feels that way.
She does.
Yeah,
so we're getting her. There was a thing for what movie was it?
Was Mother.
Mother, because she wrote in a thing. We needed a contrarian.
Yeah, we wanted. No, she's not a contrarian.
No, we needed
someone who wasn't us just jizzing over the last movie.
Right.
And Annie decided to fall on her sword and be that person.
So
I appreciate that.
Annie's
Annie.
the best. Can't wait for you guys to hear that episode. And we will see you then. You have to take me to New Zealand sometime, Shahir.
I would love to take you to New Zealand.
You never take me to
Well, I should
nice
go to New
places.
Hampshire at some point as well.
Mine will be a little closer.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll go straight from there.
That's what we should do. Our erotic fan fiction is home tours of our hometown.
Oh, yeah. See, look, we're giving you ideas so you can at least give us 5 stars.
Onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com, Twitter @onlymoviepod for your erotic Matt and Shahir fan fiction.
Only iTunes reviews for erotic fan fiction. I don't want it anywhere else.
Oh, God.
That's the most erotic. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.